A fortune teller foretold that twins would be born where one was evil and the other was good. A year later, a woman gave birth to a boy with horns and bat wings, and a girl with angel wings and a halo. The boy was sent away while she and her husband raised the girl. They kept the wrong one. It couldn't have been more obvious. Two children, just as the prophecy predicted. Darius horned with jagged black wings, Lucy angelic in her perfection, down to the snow-white wings and the glowing gold halo hanging above her head like the sun above the land. Banish him, they decided. Mother cried. Father didn't, but his eyes betrayed his sadness. He'd longed for a boy, anguished over the prophecy night after night. By a morsel of mercy built on hope and dashed dreams, he couldn't bring himself to kill Darius. He dug the demon child the deepest dungeon, fortified it with concrete walls, and buried it beneath enough material to build 100 cities. And then he returned to their perfect daughter, the sparkle in her smile and those mesmerizing eyes that swirled like the galaxy itself. She's the savior, Father said, trying to convince himself. So he raised her as such. If the world needed anything, it was a savior. Luscious forests had long since turned to desert. The oceans had retreated to oversized ponds, leaving skeletons of 10,000 species in their wake. Even the fate of humanity faltered, teetering on the edge of a bottomless well. The remnants warred amongst themselves, dying one by one. She should have saved them. She could have saved them. She didn't. Loud praise turned to hushed conversations. Happiness in her parents' eyes turned to stolen glances as she grew into her true self, not into the person they'd tried to mold, who they'd tried so desperately to fit to the prophecy. Is it us? Father asked. Had she been born a savior just to gravitate towards the brother they'd discarded? She's become Evai. Don't say it, Mother hissed. Don't you dare say it. She's just troubled, that's all. It's a lot of pressure to put on a kid. Troubled? Troubled barely began to describe her. She'd cause havoc if they let her out of sight, grinned devilishly when they caught her. The calls from the teacher had become routine, the meetings with the principal too. Worried parents lobbied to have Lucy expelled. They signed petitions. They pulled their kids from the academy. All the while, Lucy listened impassively to their complaints. She shrugged them off and stuck with the story that she was the savior, that they should bow to her. What if we guessed wrong? Father said, daring to say out loud his creeping suspicion. What if Lucy wasn't the one we were supposed to keep? Looks can be deceiving. We judged a book by its cover and are paying the price. We'll never know, Mother answered. We made our decision. We could know. He pulled the diagrams of the dungeon he'd built, traced a line on the map of the path she'd have to take. How? He's gone. Is he? The prophecy had said he would save the world that so desperately needed saving. It said nothing of evil, whether it'd perish in the darkness of a dungeon or fester like mold until it choked out what little life was left. If he was good, he'd live to fulfill the prophecy. And if he wasn't, she'd find the rotted corpse of her brother, realize what she could have been, and return a new person. And if he was good and we turned him evil, if nurture usurped nature, he didn't share his thoughts, dark as they were, that bottom of the well that they were so close to reaching. In the sparsely furnished living room, they sat Lucy down. She eyed them suspiciously, one eyebrow raised as they presented her the mission. A long-lost brother? Darius, Father said, with wings and eyes black as night. An evil brother, Lucy said. She smiled, her eyes glowing at the thought of adventure, at the thought of vanquishing the other half of the prophecy. Father nodded. We buried him so that he wouldn't destroy humanity. But he might be doing it anyways. You need to save us. Show the world that you're the savior we need. That we were right to bury him and not you. A brother. An evil, locked-away brother. Life always had its twists and turns, but usually she stood on the other end of them, twisting people's lives, turning them around, leaving them confused and shattered, wondering where it all went wrong. Once happy homes and peaceful neighborhoods turned into chaotic battlegrounds filled with sorrow and strife. A husband charmed, a kid led astray. It was all too easy. But this was a new challenge, and one Lucy relished. Mother cautioned her, told her of her brother's wings as black as night, his claws sharp as the devil's fangs. He could control weaker creatures with his mind, Mother claimed. But that was Lucy, too. Just that Lucy didn't reveal it. You'd be no match, Mother said, caressing Lucy's cheek. Her touch was cool, faint flakes of white drifting from her fingers. But that's okay because he'll be dead. Bring back his head or the remnants of his broken wings, and all will be well. Your father will forget he ever doubted you. I will, Lucy promised. I'll bring his head wrapped in broken wings. I'll break them myself and tear him apart. Father didn't talk much on the drive to the location. His hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles white. He fiddled with the radio, settling on music rather than the endless news of droughts and devastation. Lucy concentrated, manipulating the frequency just enough to create static. As soon as he fixed it, she disrupted it again. A few clear words of a song would sneak through, only to vanish into the static once more. Eventually, he gave up, and the rest of the drive passed in silence. Here, Father said. They pulled over to the side of the road, a desolate and unremarkable spot. The steep mountainside loomed overhead, threatening to reclaim the roadway with every shift of the earth. You'll travel due east from here, Father instructed. Do your best not to get lost. You'll find the stairway. And if I do get lost, wait for nightfall. If he's alive, he'll have drawn others to him. They'll lead you there. Good company, Lucy said with a smirk. Doesn't sound like much of a dungeon if he has friends down there, she added. Friends? More like vermin, Lucy thought. Earthworms and rats, probably. Better food than companions. Safe travels, Father said, his voice stiff. His lips were pressed thin and his eyes were sharp, harder than they used to be. Lucy could read the truth between his words. Safe travels wasn't a hope for her success. It was a hollow wish, a parting acknowledgement that he didn't expect her to return victorious. Thanks, Daddy, Lucy replied sweetly, letting a sly grin creep onto her face, her eyes glowing faintly with amusement. Father said nothing. The car door slammed and the engine roared to life. Lucy watched as he disappeared down the road, swallowed by the jagged cliffs. She imagined him misjudging a sharp turn, the car careening over the edge. The thought made her smile, not because she minded being left behind, but because it felt like the least he deserved for doubting her. She stretched her wings, lifting off the ground with effortless grace. The air rushed past her as she ascended above the cliffs, the landscape unfolding below her. Toxic clouds rose from sulfurous pits, the remnants of once thriving forests now reduced to barren wastelands. The bones of animals dotted the ground like monuments to forgotten life. What a fitting graveyard, she thought, her lips curling upward. As she flew, her mind wandered. She reflected on her parents' foolishness. They'd placed all their faith in a fragile prophecy, and in the child they thought fit its description. But prophecies were riddles, and they'd failed to see the truth behind it. White wasn't always good, and black wasn't always evil, though people were too simple to believe otherwise. Lucy didn't need to be the savior. That wasn't her goal. She only needed to survive. If she destroyed her brother, she'd make her way back and remind them who held the power. I'll tear his wings apart and toss him into the abyss. And then, she smiled at the thought, I'll decide what to do with the world after that. But first, she needed to find him. The cliffs stretched endlessly, the terrain unforgiving. The stairway Father spoke of never appeared. Exhausted, she landed, the bubbling heat of the sulfurous pits soothing her like a warm blanket. She inhaled the acrid scent deeply, as if it were something sweet and familiar. Night fell and the world turned darker. Only her halo and the pale moonlight illuminated the bubbling waters and jagged rocks. That's when his friends began to emerge. Rats scurried from their hiding places. Bats flitted between shadows. Worms wriggled from cracks and insects skittered across the rocks. So predictable, she thought with a smirk. Just like him. They'd lead her to Darius, no doubt, and when they did, she'd destroy them all, starting with her brother.